Hi everyone. So this week I wasn't going to do story time where I'm reading stories because I was going to focus on Holy Week, but I've had quite a few parents emailing me saying that you're all missing a story time with me. So what I've decided to do is I've picked quite a big book. This book is called The Middler. It's one of Mrs. Tibbets's books and she lent it to me. And it's a very thick chapter book. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to film myself reading it and I'll post up little bits of it every day so that you can follow along. And even though the rest of your learning you're going to have a break from today, I'm going to start this with you. I'm going to still post a video every day for you. So if you just want to follow story time, that's fine. I will post some fun activities for you, but the rest of your learning you can have a break from now for the Easter holidays, okay? So I'll read you the blurb first. The blurb is the bit on the back that tells us about the story. It says, Maggie makes a gripping hero. Maggie is a middle child, overlooked and unheard. Beyond her town's boundary, the quiet war rages and the dirty, dangerous wanderers roam. Then Maggie meets Una, a hungry wanderer girl in need of help, and everything she's ever known gets turned on its head, which means that everything that's normal to Maggie changes and her whole world changes. Okay, so it's quite interesting. Let's have a look. Chapter 1. I took my summer diary out of my drawer, nearly all the sheets of paper mismatched. On the very last page, I'd drawn a picture of a red admiral. It had black wings and bright red stripes, just like the ones we'd seen up at the butterfly fields. I straightened the yellow wool bow that held it all together and ran my hands over the front to flatten it down. I wouldn't win best diary as an eldest, always wins that, but maybe I could get runner-up. I carried it downstairs. Are you ready, Mags? Trig had the front door open and was leaning right out of it, both hands gripping at the door frame. His diary was on the doormat, tied up with garden string. We should have left already, shouldn't we, Dad? We should have left. Oh, Maggie. Dad shook his head at my legs. We really need to do something about that uniform. It's even shorter than it was before the holidays. I yanked at the bottom of my dress and it shrugged back up again. Jed! 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 Trig was turning red with all his shouting. Just a minute! Jed's voice echoed down the stairs. Mum came out of the kitchen, booted up for a day in the fields. Leave without him, she said. It's his own fault if he's late. Come on, Maggie. Trig picked up his diary, but I wasn't going anywhere until Jed was with us. Eventually he appeared, shirt hanging out and jam on his chin. Did you remember your summer diary? Said Trig. It's in here. Jed turned around and patted his back pocket. His messy folded pages flapped out of the top. Dad went to wipe the jam off Jed's face, but he ducked under his arm and we all ran through the door into the warm September air. Trig was hopeless at running. He held his diary right out in front of him all the way to school. Me and Jed had to stop at every corner for him to catch up. Good morning, Mrs. Zimmerman. Good morning, Mr. Temple. Good morning, Miss Conter. Good morning, Mr. Webster. Good morning, everyone. The school hall smelled like the beginning of term, wood, oil and scouring powder. Smells weird, doesn't it, Maggie? Doesn't it, Jed? Smells weird. Trig fidgeted and scrunched up his nose. Shh, I said. Lindy Chowdhury was in front of all of us, all cross-legged and straight-backed and long-haired. Her dress had a new frill sewn around the hem. Jed scooted forward so he was sitting closer to her. Mrs. Zimmerman clasped her hands together in front of her waist. Mr. Webster was quite kindly spent part of his summer sanding and oiling our hall floor. Aren't we lucky? I spread my fingers out and pressed my palms onto the smooth wood. Must have taken him ages. Heads down, please, for the morning chant. Our eldest are our heroes, our eldest are special, our eldest are brave. Shame upon any who holds back an eldest, and shame upon their kin. Most of all, shame upon the wanderers. Let peace settle over the quiet war, truly and forever. Mrs. Zimmerman lifted her head. tilted it to one side and smiled. Welcome back to Fenniswick School, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your break. We bit at our nails and gazed up at the empty walls while she said all the things that head teachers have to say at the beginning of term. As well as the sanding the floors, Mr. Webster has also dug over the toilets for us. Please be sure to use the new ones and leave the old ones to compost. He's left everything very clearly signposted. We clapped for Mr. Webster. Miss Conte has returned to us after having a baby, a little boy called Michael, an eldest. We're hoping his dad might pop in with him one lunchtime. We clapped for Miss Conte. Two of our pupils, Sally Owens and Deb Marino, both eldest of course, turned 14 over the summer and have gone to camp. We clapped for Sally Owens, we clapped for Deb Marino. And two more of our eldest are heading off for camp this very Saturday, Jed Cruz and Lindy Chowdhury. Jed leaned in and nudged shoulders with Lindy. My hands were getting fed up with all the clapping. And just before we return to our classes, we have a special guest here today with some important news. Mrs. Zimmerman held out an arm towards the entrance hall. No one came out. We have a special guest here with some important news, she said again, louder this time. No one came out. Mr. Temple cleared his throat and nodded towards the window. Mayor Anderson was sitting on the wall in the littlest outdoor play area, feet resting on a go-fast cart and two hands cupped around an enormous butty. Cheese by the looks of it. She finished up chewing, swallowed her mouthful, and gave us a wave. Mrs. Zimmerman took a deep breath in. Would you be so kind as to let the mayor know we're ready for her, please, Mr. Temple? Okay. Mr. Mayor Anderson stood in the middle of Mr. Webster's newly oiled floor, her hair drawn back in a straggy ponytail. I'm not going to beat around the bush and do all that "what have you learned over the summer" rubbish. I'll leave that to your teachers, eh? She gave us a wink and got a few sniggers back from the audience. Mrs. Zimmerman closed her eyes. But what I am going to do, the mayor went on, is tell you that we've heard reports of wanderers 5 miles down of the 5 miles south of the town boundary. Wanderers. The sniggering stopped. Mrs. Zimmerman opened her eyes. A shiver crept across my shoulders. Yep, Mayor Anderson nodded. Yesterday I was up at the city, met with some old colleagues. It's been a while since we had wanderers in our area, but their numbers appear to be increasing. She took a slow moment to look from one side of the hall to the other, catching as many of our eyes as she could. So, she carried on, why do we not want wanderers nearby? Anyone? Trigg stuck his arm up as high as he could get it, pushed it even higher with his other hand. Mayor Anderson couldn't miss him. Go on then, tell us, Trigg. Trigg looked up to the ceiling, the way you do when you're trying hard to remember something. Dirty, dangerous and deceitful. Dirty, dangerous and deceitful, Mayor Anderson boomed the words back at us, counting them off on her fingers. And to think, she said, that they're supposed to be on our side in this war. She clasped her hands behind her and swayed backwards and forwards with her feet stopped still. Our country is one of the few places, perhaps the only place, that has kept the enemy at bay. Why is that, do you think? Trigg stuck his hand up again. Our geography has helped for sure, Mayor Anderson nodded at Trigg, like he'd given her the answer even though he hadn't. Along with our land's wonderful capacity for self-sufficiency. She nodded some more. But the real reason our country survives is us. Our very selves. She held her arms wide. We are an adaptable people. Stoic, brave. We understand the importance of hard work and sacrifice for a greater good. We have a long history of wartime resilience. It's in our blood. And the bravest of us all, of course, are our eldest. She looked at Jed and Lindy. They nodded shoulders again. At camp, said Mayor Anderson, our eldest joined the Quiet War. They fight valiantly. They fight heroically. They fight so that we, back home, can remain safe. My one and only child, Caroline, went to camp 10 years ago this very month. I couldn't be more proud. We clapped for Caroline. The mayor held up a hand. But, she said, the Wanderers do not send their eldest to camp. She did a slow shake of her head. They are protected from their enemy by our brave heroes, but they selfishly keep their own eldest close. They disobey Andrew Salisbury's edict that decrees we must all send our eldest to camp. They deny their families the opportunity to live in a town in a civilised manner, and they deny their eldest the opportunity to fight for their country. They are dirty, dangerous and deceitful. Do we want their kind anywhere near us, here in Fenniswick? No, Mayor Anderson. We shook our heads. So I'm going to stop there before we move on. I'm going to move on tomorrow. I'm going to film it now. So we've started off and we've learned about some important characters. There's some tricky words in there, but at the end of every video I'm going to explain. So far we have got 3 children, Jed, Trig and Maggie. Now Jed is an eldest. He is the firstborn son, so he's older than Maggie. Then Maggie is a middle child, and then you've got Trig, who is the youngest. And they've just started going back to school after the summer holidays. And they've gone into school, and their head teacher, Mrs. Zimmerman, has talked to them all about how we start in the school year. And then their mayor, the person who's in charge of their town, has come and told them all about the Quiet War. And the Quiet War is something that's been happening for many, 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 many years, where an eldest in every family has to go off to keep the town safe, and you're not allowed to leave the city. And we've also learnt about things called wanderers. Now, wanderers are people that don't stay in a certain town. They move around, they wander around, and the children are being taught that the wanderers are dirty, dangerous and deceitful. The word deceitful means that they can't be trusted, they tell lies. So that's what we've learnt so far in the story. Come back tomorrow and you'll see what happens next.